Someone you know has already done this. They stopped posting. They stopped commenting. They stopped everything, but they never left. And the psychology behind this silent exit is something that affects way more people than you realize. There's a new kind of disappearing act happening everywhere online. People aren't dramatically deleting their accounts anymore. They're not making big announcements about leaving. Instead, they're doing something much more quiet. They're fading out while staying logged in. Their profiles sit there untouched for months or even years. And when you understand why this happens, you'll start noticing it all around you. Maybe you'll even recognize it in yourself. This whole thing is confusing because it seems to go against logic. If someone is done with social media, why not just leave? Why keep the account? Why stay connected to something you're no longer using? The answer is actually more complicated than you'd expect, and it says a lot about how social media has changed the way we think about ourselves and our relationships with other people. Let's start with the most obvious reason: fear of missing out. But not the kind you're thinking of. When most people talk about fear of missing out, they mean the fear of not being at the party. But there's another version. It's the fear of being forgotten. When you delete your account, you erase yourself from that world. Your name disappears from group chats, your comments vanish from old posts, your face gets removed from tagged photos. For a lot of people, that feels like dying a small digital death. So instead of leaving completely, they just go quiet. The account stays as a placeholder, a proof that they existed in that space. Even if they never come back, at least the door is still open. The second reason goes even deeper. It's about avoiding confrontation. When you publicly leave social media, people ask questions. They want to know why. They might think something is wrong. They might take it personally if you unfriend them. Some people even get offended when someone leaves, like it's a rejection of the whole group. By disappearing quietly, you skip all of that drama. Nobody notices at first. And by the time they do, enough time has passed that it would be weird to bring it up. You get to exit without having an awkward conversation with anyone. There's also something happening on a psychological level that researchers call ego depletion. Every time you post something online, you're making dozens of tiny decisions: what to say, how to say it, which photo to use, whether the timing is right, should you use a filter, is this too personal, is this not personal enough? All of these micro decisions drain your mental energy. Over time, some people hit a wall where they just can't make those decisions anymore. But the idea of formally quitting feels like yet another big decision they don't have energy for. So they take the path of least resistance. They just stop. No announcement, no goodbye, just silence. Now, here's a reason that might hit close to home for some of you. A lot of people disappear because they started to hate who they were online. Social media encourages a certain kind of performance. You learn what gets likes, you learn what gets comments, and slowly you start shaping your posts to get those reactions. But at some point, you look back at your feed and realize you've been playing a character. The real you doesn't actually talk like that or care about those things. But you can't just suddenly change because your audience expects the old version. So you disappear. You stop feeding the character. But you keep the account because deleting it would mean admitting the whole thing was fake. There's another psychological factor called the sunk cost trap. You've spent years building this profile. You have thousands of photos uploaded, hundreds of connections, memories saved in messages. Deleting all of that feels like throwing away part of your history. Even if you never look at it again, knowing it exists feels important, so people stay technically present even when they're mentally checked out. The account becomes a storage unit they pay for but never visit. And then there's the simplest reason of all: habit mixed with exhaustion. Opening social media apps is automatic for most people. You do it without thinking. Your thumb just goes there. So even when someone decides they're done participating, they might still open the app out of pure muscle memory. They scroll, they observe, they just don't contribute anymore. They've shifted from being a creator to being a lurker. And lurking doesn't require an exit, it just requires silence. Now, here's where this gets really important. When someone disappears without leaving social media, they often enter a strange mental space. They're still consuming all the content, they're still seeing the highlight reels of everyone else's life, they're still getting exposed to the comparison and the noise, but they've lost the one thing that made social media feel like a two-way street. They've lost their voice. And research shows that passive scrolling without engagement is actually worse for mental health than active posting. So these digital ghosts often end up in the worst of both worlds, still affected by everything they see, but no longer feeling like they're part of any of it. So why do people disappear without leaving social media? Because fully leaving feels too final, too dramatic, too much like admitting defeat. Staying invisible is easier. It avoids questions, it preserves the past, it keeps options open. But it also creates this hollow middle ground where you're technically connected, but emotionally gone. If you've noticed yourself drifting into this pattern, it might be worth asking what you're actually holding on to. Sometimes the hardest part isn't leaving, it's admitting that you left a long time ago. Anyway, that's it for today. Subscribe if this resonated with you.